Hello, my name's Ketevan. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. I am super excited for today's video because there is a new reading challenge happening on BookTube. It was started by Scott from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and I'll link his video down below. It's way more informative than mine will be, announcing the challenge, but it's called Straya September, and it's reading Australian literature in September, which I am like so happy for. If you don't know, probably not because I don't think I've ever told anyone on this channel. But I used to live in Australia, and every year I try to read at least one or two Australian books. I really love it. I love Australian Indigenous writing. I love it. So I have quite a few unread books on my TBR that is Australian literature. So I'm going to be doing this challenge a little bit differently than I think I would if I were just doing it sort of from scratch, because I want to prioritize the books on my shelves. I'll go over the prompts very briefly, but you should definitely go check out Scott's video. He has a lot of details about, you know, the challenge and the different prompts and what they mean and fun references and all those good things. And he has lots of fun facts about Australia, which I don't think I can really add. Oh, actually, you know what? I can add to one. I can add one fun Australian fact to his long list. Wombats, if you know wombats, they're cute little bears. They're not that cute though. I mean, they are cute, but they're like vicious. But anyway, wombat poop is cubed. And I almost didn't believe that. I thought it might have been like a tall tale type of deal. And it's not. When I was walking one day on a trail, I saw wombat poop and it was actually cubed. So anyway, that's my fun fact for Australia. Now let's get into the books. So the 4 prompts, there's the first prompt, which is just any book by any Australian author. And so for me, this has been sitting on my shelf for way too long. It's called Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. It's a really like super classic Australian book. As you can tell, it's the Penguin Black classic. It's set in 1900, and basically a bunch of these young ladies go for a picnic at this rock, at Hanging Rock, and then they just disappear. And I guess we'll probably not figure out what happened to them, but the book kind of explores the after effects, I believe. And so this has been just sitting on my like spooky shelf, which is in a different spot in my house, because I only I'm like, oh, I want to read this in October, and I just haven't looked at it. Like I haven't like literally seen it, and I kind of forgot it was there. So yeah, I think this will be a perfect chance to just get this read. So I'm really excited about this. Yeah, so it's supposed to be really creepy and atmospheric and gothic. So is it gothic? Well, I don't know. I'm gonna say it's gothic, but anyway. So that's the first book for my TBR. Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. And then the next one is an Indigenous author, so an Aboriginal author. Again, this one has been sitting on my shelf for so long, Carpenteria by Alexis Wright. Alexis Wright's a really famous writer. I think she won something for this. Yeah, this one won the Miles Franklin, so this is like a very famous book. It's quite long, so I've been putting it off, but I think, actually it's not that long, it's 500 pages. Why am I intimidated? Yeah, I'm clearly just gonna read this next month. And so what is this about? I've like known I want to read this for so long that I don't even know what it's about anymore. I just know I want to read it without knowing what it's about. It's a blend of myth and scripture, farce and politics. Okay, so it's like a small town, unforgettable portrait of all the different, you know, people in the town. So it's kind of like a town story. But what I've read about this, actually now I'm remembering, what I read is that it has lots of like, not magical realism exactly, but like sort of a similar writing style, and it can kind of get a little confusing. So maybe that's why I was like, oh, I'm not sure, but I'm really excited about this one. And then for my third one, it's an immigrant book. And so this is where I'm really cheating. Or not cheating, like I'm not cheating, but I would never normally pick this as like the main prompt for an Australian writer, but it's on my shelf and I really want to get it read. So, called A Town Like Alice by Nevile Shute. And this is set partially in Australia, I believe. It starts in Japan and then ends up, although maybe not, maybe the whole thing's in Japan, I'm not sure. But she meets Australian people, and I think she is Australian, but anyway, the point is that Nevile Shute is like barely, like we can barely call him an immigrant. He's British and he moved to Australia, I think like less than 10 years before he died at a very old age. I'm not even sure exactly when he settled in Australia, but I don't know, like it's on the line, right? So I wouldn't normally recommend this for like an immigrant book in Australia. There is actually so many better options. And so if I didn't have, you know, my reading down my bookshelf challenge simultaneously going, I would have two other options, which I'm going to share with you. So the first is called Echoes, A Distant Voices, Distant Lives by Drefenik. So if you don't know, I'm also Maltese, and during the 60s, Maltese society was kind of like a little hectic, and there was a mass migration, the only, I think, mass migration in Maltese history. And so we sort of went 3 different places, and one of those places was Australia. And so this is a historical fiction book about that journey for one Maltese family. I bought this as a gift for my mom. She read it and loved it, and she still has it. And it's one of those books you can't even get like an ebook from the library type of deal. So I just have to wait until she like gives it back to me, or lends it to me because it's hers. I gave it to her. But so yeah, that one I highly recommend. She loved it. She like lent it to my aunt. My aunt loved it. I think it's like making the rounds in my family currently. So highly recommend that one. And then since I still couldn't have read this one, even if I wanted to, my other real choice, mostly just because I've been dying to read it ever since I found out it was a book. It's called The Slap by Christos Tsoilkas, I think is how you say his name. He's from Greek immigrant parents. I saw the adaptation of this at some point and I just thought it was a nice Australian TV show, and that's all I thought of it. And then I was talking to my Australian friend and she was saying something and I was like, wait, that's a book? And she was like, yeah. So the premise is that basically all these like, you know, adults, you know, like millennial-ish age adults with kids, they're getting together for a birthday party. And at the outdoor barbecue, like birthday party, one of the adults slaps one of the other adults' child. So like not their own child. Like they just slap a child that is like not their child. And if you, I mean, I'm sure you can guess, like Australian culture, at least in Melbourne where it's set and everything, like that is like really not okay. Like, I mean, I don't think it's okay in most places, but like, it's like really not okay. Like, so anyway, basically that just sort of unravels like all this drama and all these stuff. And I don't even remember what happened. I just remember loving it. So I really want to read the book, but that's not the book I'll be reading because I want to read this book and get it off my shelf first. But those are my 2 recommendations for more, you know, proper immigrant stories, or immigrant authors rather. So then the 4th prompt is a little more fluid because there's no real prompt other than someone from a different state. So I think the reason that Scott did this is because most authors come from, you know, either Victoria, Queensland, or New South Wales, and kind of like the rest of the states don't have as much representation in publishing. So the idea would be to sort of like find someone from a different location. Easy if you happen to pick all Victorian authors like from Melbourne, but if you kind of picked like, you know, widely already, then this can be a bit more of a challenge. So because I don't want to read a very long book that I don't have any other books. Actually, that's not true. Oh, I really don't feel like getting up. I'm sorry. It's like it's stuck in the back. I don't want to dig it out, but it's called The Fatal Shore by Robert Hughes. Yeah, and I really do want to read this. It's very long, very thick, and the copy I have is a very heavy hardback, but it's a nonfiction about the penal colony system of early Australian society, and it's not that old. It was written in the 80s, but basically, I don't know, it's not even out of print, it's just nobody bothered making an audiobook out of it. Or they did rather, but they didn't digitize it, as I've learned in my hunts, so for this audiobook. So basically I have the book, but I just know that in September I'm not gonna have time to read it, and that would fit my 4th prompt because Robert Hughes was born in New South Wales, and I have only Queensland. Lindsay Joan, where is she? Lindsay Joan is Queensland, and Alexis Wright is Victoria, so that would fit perfectly, but it's just way too long. So instead, I'm going for a book that's not on my shelf because I'm trying to be realistic. So for the fourth one, I decided to put away The Fate of Shore, save it for another time, because I want to be a little bit realistic because I have a lot of things planned for September. So I instead decided to read The Rabbit Proof Fence, which is, I think, a super classic book, and if people have heard of it, you've probably seen the movie that it was later turned into, but it's written by a woman called Doris Pilkington Garimura, and she's from Western Australia, so that's why I chose her, because she wasn't from any of the other states that I had chosen from for the other prompts, but also because this is like a really great classic book. And if you don't know, if you're not familiar with the story, it's basically this, she was, you know, as a young child, was stolen from her mother. She was born in 1937 and was later reunited with her, you know, 20 years later. And then she wrote this book, which is the story of her mother being stolen from her grandmother. So like 3 generations of women. And so the girls were sold. So if you don't know what the stolen generations are, the Australian government, this also happened in Canada and the US as well, they would steal Aboriginal or Indigenous children from their parents to raise them right in white society. And obviously this was very traumatic and you know, harmful in multiple ways. But anyway, so this story is about her mother and I think her sisters. She wasn't by herself, she was with at least 1 or 2 other girls. They were stolen away and then they ran away twice, and it was like a 9-week walk back home. And the Rabbit Proof Fence, if you don't know, white Australian people brought rabbits to Australia. They're an invasive species, and they brought them and they were like, oh wow, this is actually really bad for the environment. We should probably like try to stop this. So they built this fence like all along in Western Australia and other places I think too, to try to keep the rabbits from moving or migrating or keep the rabbits contained. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but basically there was this fence, this very clear marker, and so they just followed the rabbit fence home, walked 9 weeks, and then they were taken again, and then they walked home again. So it was, I think when it came out, it was very popular, very big deal. The movie was a big deal. I think I was way too little to remember it, but I think it's considered one of the classics. But I'm really looking forward to reading this book. So I think I did a pretty good job. I mean, I have 2 Aboriginal authors and then 2 white authors, but you know, it is what it is. I want to get these off my bookshelf first, and then maybe for next year I'll come up with like the best TBR, like that I'm really excited by. I mean, I am excited by all these books. Like if you know me, if you follow this channel, like you know that these books that are just like, oh, hanging over my head, I need to read them, like they're not an obligation. I get rid of books if I don't want to read them anymore. It's not a big deal. I do want to read them. It just makes me kind of sad to pick this one as like an immigrant story to Australia because it's not even in Australia, and like my family migrated to Australia, so like I feel like I should pick a better book, but it's okay. It's okay. It's just to get it done. So anyway, I really hope that some of you participate. Again, I'll link Scott's original video down below. It's really funny. It has more details on like the specific rules and stuff. But anyway, I hope you also read at least one. I think the other option for this is you just read 1 Australian book, so you don't feel like you have to you know, pick out 4 Australian books for 1 month. Like if you just read 1 Australian book, I think that also counts. So anyway, I hope you join us in this reading challenge because Australian lit just definitely does not get enough love, and I really am looking forward to seeing what everyone's reading and what everyone has as options and things like that, because I think basically once I've read these, I think I need to start shopping for more Australian lit. So that'll be exciting. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!